Welcome to Club Fantasy FFL. My name is Michael Sicoli. We are going to be jumping into an episode just in a second. Myself and Joel talking about the 49ers and the Chiefs. Two teams that don't need any meeting together for them to know each other, but we're going to be diving into them and getting to know each of them individually, diving into those stories. And since we got training camp in full swing right now, we have a lot of news and a lot of headlines we want to touch on, give our Dynasty takes on. So all that stuff is coming up right after the intro, as soon as I have it pulled up. How's it going, Joel? We're here. We're back. It's August. We got August here. We had football play. Oh, so much has happened. How's it going?
Good, man. Yeah, we had a little thunderstorm here in Canton that kind of interrupted the old Hall of Fame game on Thursday, but all good. We could use the rain here, so I'm not complaining too much, and I don't think we missed too much because Hall of Fame games generally suck because nobody cares. But
it cut out.
Yeah, it's good to have football back.
Yeah, if you're going to lose any part of the Hall of Fame game, it's okay to lose the fourth quarter.
Yeah, exactly.
I think we were able to make do, and I think that storm headed over and hit us over in New York as well. But yeah, so we got a lot to dive into today. We have active news to talk about, which is fun because we have, good news and bad news. We have injury updates that will impact a lot of dynasty rosters out there, as well as the people that may or may not want to trade for them. So a lot of changes in the market in just this 1 week span. And we're going to jump into all that in a second here, Joel. But before we do that, I think I would be remiss. I would truly be remiss if I didn't mention the 5th annual Women in Fantasy Football and Galvanized Scholarship event, which we're hosting right now. If you want to win some great time memorabilia, you want to just help women's sports, because obviously not enough has been done to get more women in sports. Hit the link in our description below. If you're watching on YouTube, it's in the description. Buy some raffle tickets for a chance to win. It's just $5 a ticket. All of them go to that scholarship fund. They're raffling off. We are raffling off this week a signed Garrett Wilson jersey and a signed Jalen Waddle jersey. The raffles end August 14th at 6 p.m. Eastern. So highly encourage people to get those tickets now because those jerseys are awesome. Garrett Wilson and Jalen Waddle. We are talking about those guys for the next 10 years. Maybe longer, Joel. Maybe longer, God willing. So good to see you, Joe Ortiz, in the chat going on. Good seeing anyone hopping in. Always. Chat's always open for people to help you guys get on through. You want to jump into some news here, Joel?
Yeah, let's do it. Just want to say that, God, I can't do that particular jersey right behind me was won in one of the WAF raffles last year. So always excited. Always a fun time of year. The Women in Fantasy shows are always super fun with Faith and Kelly, and get a chance to win a jersey for a measly $5 raffle. It's really good cause. Great stuff. Always look forward to it.
Yeah, even though Kelly turned down my one of my trades in the Club Fantasy Dynasty League, I forgive. It's okay. We'll circle back. But either way, make sure you get those raffles. Not only support a great cause, but also some great prizes as well. Only for $5 a ticket. Good to see you, Caesar. Good to see you, Albert. Good to see both of you guys in the chat. Always happy to see our usual people popping on in. But let's get into some of that news because, like I said, we do have a decent amount to talk about to start the show. DeAndre Hopkins, let's start with this. I'm going with the ticker this time, Joel, because we have so much to dive into, and I imagine it'll take a little bit here. So, sticking off with DeAndre Hopkins, hurting the foot, out 4 to 6 weeks. Not great. Not very good. But how does this impact the way you're looking at Hopkins this year? He's been a tough guy to nail down.
Yeah, he's 32, so this isn't necessarily something that's necessarily going to be an easy recovery from. There's some people saying the Twitter docs and everything saying this may be an MCL, maybe an LCL, something like that. So doesn't sound like he's going to be ready. He probably won't at least be 100% for week 1. I think this has got to really ding his value. Not that he doesn't have a ton of dynasty value right now because he is 32, but if he was someone you were leaning on for this year as a contender, that's a very serious concern because this is something that's probably going to linger, probably going to affect him for at least the first month of the season, even if he's on the field. So I think you definitely got to be concerned about it.
Yeah, as am I. And I misspoke before because I was getting ahead of myself. Knee injury for DeAndre Hopkins. But, it's something. I think DeAndre Hopkins is a player that's going to be on a lot of rosters, a lot of dynasty rosters that are right in that midpoint, the point where they can push in, they can push out, and stuff like this. It really is. I'm not counting out DeAndre Hopkins for the season, but we have a lot of question marks about Tennessee and about Will Levis, and a 4 to 6 week injury, which allows both Tyler Boyd and Calvin Ridley, newcomers to this team, to build more chemistry with Will Levis. DeAndre Hopkins does not need to be DeAndre Hopkins in Tennessee. He didn't last year, and I guess he did last year, but we barely. I have low expectations now, and I drafted him last week, but
does this mean Treylon Burks season coming?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. It means Treylon Burks is going for 1,207. No,
he's having a good camp.
Listen, realistically, I'm as in on Treylon Burks as I was since day one. I think he's a good player. I maintain that I can't see it happening in Tennessee. But maybe Will Levis proves me wrong and he can support a bunch of people. Because Tyler Boyd will get his. He's a solid slot receiver. Calvin Ridley, I think, is going to be a huge part of this offense. I'm very, very in on Calvin Ridley this year. So I don't see Will Levis supporting 2.5 worth of fantasy receivers.
But, here's the thing. It's DeAndre Hopkins is 32 and already hurt. Calvin Ridley's 30. Tyler Boyd will turn 30 during the season, early in the season. You're kind of gambling if you think all those guys are going to make it through the season. So I think Burks is going to have opportunities. I don't want to turn this into say that, Burks is going to blow up this year, but he's going to have opportunities. He's going to have a chance to show what he can do. Now, him being simultaneously good and available has not happened very often, but I think he's going to have a chance this year.
Yeah. Listen, you're not going to hear me argue with you on that because I would love nothing more than to see Treylon Burks pop off. And I become more and more in on this offense and this new regime coming in by the day. I'm very optimistic. I just don't know what I see in Will Levis. And Tyler Boyd and Calvin Ridley have been fairly reliable of staying on the field lately. If we remove Calvin Ridley's suspension and taking time off from the game, injury-wise, he's been fairly on the field. But it'll be curious. Yeah, you're right that they're all up there in age. Treylon Burks is obviously one of the younger players on the team. So it'll definitely be interesting to watch for. And Joe points out that he heard no surgeries required for Hopkins, but he is old, won't be ready until later in the season. Yeah, and that's always the big thing with injuries that we always point out on this show is just because it's a 4 to 6 week timeline does not mean he's back in 4 to 6 weeks.
Right.
And it doesn't mean he's good until 6 to 8 weeks or longer.
Yep.
It could take a couple weeks to ramp up. So those things are.
And he's going to be at risk for,
another injury,
cascade injuries, for re-injury. It's going to be a concern all year long, basically.
Yep. So second little headline here to talk about is Justin Herbert in a walking boot. Plantar fasciitis is the condition here. Expected to be out for around 2 weeks is what I saw. Shouldn't impact him for week 1. But for now, Easton Stick is the expected starter in LA. Reports out of camp are negative about this QB backup room between him and Max Duggan and another UDFA. So any concerns about Justin Herbert, or are we just kind of writing this off of he'll be ready for week 1?
My concerns with Justin Herbert go above and beyond his injuries. It's just that I think this is going to be a terrible passing offense. I think they're going to be a bad team. So, yeah, I don't think this is a long-term issue. So I think it's something I'm willing to buy on. Like if there's a contending team that has Justin Herbert and is, getting very nervous, like if you're non-contender, this should be non-news. You shouldn't care. If you're a contender and you're relying on Justin Herbert as like your QB2 or something like that, if that team is, I've got a ton of Justin Herbert already, so I've been getting some pretty low ball offers, which I have
Hmm.
declined. But I'm interested in going out and buying if I can kind of stash him for a year.
Yeah, Justin Herbert's one of the best quarterbacks in football. I think that's almost beyond debate at this point. And value like that will only go higher. And right now, I do agree with you that I think Justin Herbert's value is an all-time low right now. We have the injury. We have questions about the weapons around him. We have questions about this run first Greg Roman offense. He's still Justin Herbert. And if it doesn't work out this year, it'll work out next year. So completely with you that he's still a very good buy and people can use
I think the big picture concern here is, are the Chargers really bad? And plantar fasciitis is there's no real good surgical remedy for it.
Yeah,
you need to just rest. So I think there's a real chance that if they're really bad, and I expect them to be bad, they could just shut him down like week 9, week 10, something like that, and say, we just need to rest him and rebuild for next year. So I think that's a real concern if you're looking toward this year and using Herbert.
Yeah, I think the bottom of the AFC West is going to be really interesting this year. I have no idea who finishes second. I have no idea who finishes.
I like the Raiders, but I like the Raiders because I think both Denver and the Chargers are going to be terrible. I think they're both top 5 draft picks next year.
There you go. It is pretty bad down there. I think the Raiders are going to be terrible. Personally, I think they're going to implode, but I guess we'll see. Tyreek Hill. This was a bit of an interesting one. Fresh off becoming number 1 on the top 100 voted by the players, Tyreek Hill got a $90 million contract restructure. Now, the important point here that I missed initially, it is adding no new years. There are no new years added to this. It is just adding a significant amount of money to the years he already has. So for Dynasty purposes, we savvy owners still remember word for word him saying that he's thinking he'll probably retire at the end of his current deal. This does not add any new years to extend that. It just makes it more profitable for him within those years. So do you think this is a sell high opportunity for someone who's obviously at the top of his game? We're looking at it as a guy who's going into his 30s. I'm not saying he's ever going to drop off, but he's a speed-based player who has now received a big boost in his contract, but it's actually adding no years. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, again, I was never really concerned with I'm going to play 3 more years and then shut it down. That's what we'll see when we get there. And, by that time, he wasn't going to have any dynasty value anyway. His value was just going to be whatever production he can give you. My concerns with Hill are, and don't get me wrong, he's absolutely an elite player, but he's pushing 30. He's, because of the way he wins on the field with the speed, the acceleration, the deceleration, the stuff like that, he's going to be very susceptible to lower body soft tissue injuries. So, any kind of, and we saw it last year at the end of the year, right? He had a hamstring pull, something like that. Those kind of things can really, as he ages into his early 30s, those things become really kind of debilitating towards how he has to win on the field. So, yeah, I think it's time to start. If you can sell high on him, I think that's probably a good thing to do. But again, if you're a contender, this isn't a piece you want to be giving up because he's going to put a lot of points up.
Yeah, no, completely agree with that. We did have another QB injury scare pop up. Now, this one, better outcome. Geno Smith, we saw him leave the field. I believe it was a hip injury or something along those lines. But the news is that he avoided serious injury. He should be back at practice next week. So not much to talk about here other than to say good. Finally getting a good roll of the dice here in August because it's been kind of a rough week with injuries. Jonathan Brooks. This was one of the bigger news of the week, in my opinion. Not that it's new, but was really a hit to the heart. Like this turned my smile upside down. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't great. Jonathan Brooks not expected to be ready for week 1, might be closer to week 3 to 4. Pup is even in play, which nowadays is keeping him out until week 4 or onward. So, listen, he tore his ACL in November. we've seen people get back for week 1 in that timeline, but if the coach and the team is telling you he won't be, then he's not going to be, because coaches and organizations are always optimistic if they can be. So I'm a little bit concerned about this, but how are you treating this Panthers running back room?
As for Brooks in specific, I mean, don't double count news, right? We
Right.
should have expected this from the beginning, that he wasn't going to be ready immediately. He's probably going to be limited this year, so just that's the nature of ACL injuries. Even though his was fairly clean and stuff like that, we saw Breece Hall come back in a year and have a very good year, and he had a fairly clean injury, but. So I this isn't unexpected, right? We probably shouldn't have expected him to be ready within the first couple of weeks. So I guess you can probably roster Chuba Hubbard in his 3.5 yards a carry and expect you're going to get a couple weeks of him in the lineup. But
I don't want
to. I don't either.
Yeah, it's because it's funny because you're absolutely right that this has been in the cards for a while now. I have not spent a single second thinking about this Panthers running back room. I kid you not. This is, listen, fantasy football is obviously important to me. It's something we've done for, over a year now on this show. And since 2020, I've not spent a single second thinking about who would be stepping up if Jonathan Brooks is not ready for week 1, because I don't care. I really don't. Like, I am more interested in holding Jerome Ford than I am in holding Chuba Hubbard. Is that wrong to do so?
100%. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
If the Jonathan Brooks injury reduces you to starting Chuba Hubbard or Miles Sanders, you've got bigger problems.
Yeah, especially in week 1 and week 2, where you should, in theory, have starting running backs that aren't hurt yet. So
exactly,
unless you're Joel here and you punted until the 10th round and took what? Who are you taking nowadays in these drafts?
And I took Chase Brown, and I've got the lead
Brown
for the Bengals.
Yes, you know what I did since
we'll talk about later in the show.
Yeah, and I won't spend too much time right now, but I did do my Warrior Bowl draft last week, 2 weeks ago, and I made a point after the 3rd round to draft every player that I would not normally draft. I drafted a full team of guys that, like, I can see the route. I don't think it happens, but if I'm wrong, like, screw it. Let's just go for it. And Zach Moss was one of those guys. And DeAndre Hopkins was one of those guys. And it's already, like, it's so bittersweet because, like, I'm just like, God, this is going to be such a long year. But anyway, any other news you want to touch on before we jump into the meat of the show?
No, I think we hit it.
Yeah, all righty. Let's go on over to that. But before we do that, actually, I want to take a second to talk about Dynasty Nerds because we have them as a sponsor, and they are fantastic. Be sure to sign up for a Dynasty Nerds subscription. Use code CLUBFANTASY to save 15% off. You get access to pretty much everything that they got, which is awesome content. They got the All-22 film room. They got the Nerd Score to look for rookies with high ceilings and longevity to keep you in contention. Because Dynasty, it's a long-running game, and we want to make sure we have the best assets for the long run. And they even have a Dynasty trade calculator as well, so whenever you want that second opinion, you can check that out. So again, use code CLUBFANTASY to get 15% off any subscription at Dynasty Nerds today, and join the Nerd Herd. Good group of guys over there. Always enjoy it.
Absolutely.
Let's go on over to San Francisco and the 49ers. What a team this is. It's all intact because they just went to the Super Bowl, as will the other team we're talking about today. Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch returning for their 8th seasons. Plenty of relevant Dynasty players to talk about. It feels like we should start with Brandon Aiyuk. Is that fair to do, or do you want to start?
No, I think that's that's the elephant in the room. So
it is the elephant in the room.
Probably should.
Yeah. So Brandon Aiyuk, I mean, listen, this is the guy that has requested a trade after holding out for a new contract. Then because it's August and July and people are just overreacting to everything, we saw him shaking hands with people, which obviously symbolized the end of the 49ers relationship with Brandon Aiyuk. But jokes aside, Brandon Aiyuk being rumored to go to the Patriots, being rumored with Washington, being rumored with Pittsburgh. Where do you think Brandon Aiyuk takes his first snap of the NFL season?
San Francisco.
Yeah, that seems fair.
He's not going anywhere. They're not trading him. That's insane.
I'm not as sure. I know you've been steadfast with that, but I think Washington or New England pays the ransom. I think both of I think New England really is in position to make a splash and make it's not Bill Belichick running this team anymore. We're going out and we're not spending a second for Mohamed Sanu. We're going to spend a first for Brandon Aiyuk. So I think that's
cold. That's just a dagger to the heart.
I mean, that's what you got to do when you're trying to override 20 plus years of, culture. They've already done plenty of things this offseason that the old Patriots would never have done, of re-signing players, of paying big money to players. Now, supporting their rookie quarterback when he makes his first start is paramount. And I think Brandon Aiyuk would be a massive get to do that. It's just a question of whether San Francisco is going to stay on the line. And it sounds like you think they won't.
I can't imagine. I mean, the only deal that makes any sense whatsoever is, I mean, we've heard floated that Devontae Adams or Brandon Aiyuk, which I don't buy. I just don't think that's happening.
Those player deals are always.
Yeah, but I mean, it's very rare. And the 49ers can't just give Aiyuk up for draft picks, right? That makes no sense. They're trying to win this year. They are well within their Super Bowl window. Purdy's going to have to get signed next year. You're going to have to give him like $65 million if he has the year we all expect him to. He's going to be the highest paid quarterback, and it's probably not going to be close. I mean, it's going to be him and Dak. Dak's probably going to get 60, and he's probably going to get 65. So, like, your window to win with the salary cap that's been enabled by the Brock Purdy rookie deal is closing, and it's closing fast. So they want to put the best team on the field that they can this year. It makes no sense for them to trade him for picks. I just don't think he's going anywhere. Like, you could talk about Ricky Pearsall. Ricky Pearsall is a very different player than Brandon Aiyuk. He does not replace Aiyuk in any way whatsoever. He's closer to a Deebo Samuel replacement than he is an Aiyuk. Like, he's not Ricky Pearsall is not the deep threat that Brandon Aiyuk is. He doesn't open up the offense the way that Aiyuk does. So I just don't see the 49ers trading him. I don't think it's going to. And what are they apart? Like a couple $1 million? I mean, obviously the structure is probably the guarantees are probably going to be tough to navigate, but I don't think the money is really an issue. And I think if you look at what he means to the offense, how good he is, like analytically, it makes sense to pay him at an elite level and you're probably moving on from Deebo next year. So yeah, I mean, just get it done. Just get him into camp. The question is, when is the sweet spot? And I'm kind of dealing with this right now. How long do I wait to kind of send out the low ball offers for Aiyuk? Because I want to play this right. I want to thread that needle of, I want to get that Aiyuk manager really nervous. It's like
you jump in too early and they're like, I can't sell.
Exactly. Yeah. But you get to the point where if he hasn't signed by the time they start playing games, then they start getting really nervous. So it's a balancing act. It's like how long. It's kind of a game of chicken, right? It's how long you want to wait. So, yeah. But I think we're getting close to that point.
It feels that way. And well, I agree with you that on the premise of, I remember when Brandon Aiyuk was drafted, and it was at the very beginning of my Dynasty days before I did super deep dives into prospects. But from my memory, and correct me if I'm wrong, this was a surprising first round day. A lot of people did not have Aiyuk in the first round from the mock drafts I saw at the time. Correct me, am I wrong?
There were people who liked him a lot, and there were people who did not like. He was a very polarizing prospect.
Yeah,
I know the Packers liked him a lot, but they ended up taking Jordan Love in the same class. So, but yeah, there was very split opinions on him as a prospect.
Yeah, and polarizing at the least, and in the sense that when that pick was made, it was a real stamp of approval from Kyle Shanahan himself. It was a true, this guy fits my scheme really well. And we weren't sure, and then it became an immediate perfect fit in this Kyle Shanahan offense. So on that premise, I completely agree with you. But I wonder the head case that Aiyuk is. I mean, I think I think he's asking for a lot of top line money, and I do question whether the 49ers are willing to give that to him when I think Kyle Shanahan could make do with a lot of guys. I think he can get it done, but I mean, I could be wrong. We've seen the 49ers play this game before exactly with Debo pretty much. They held out and eventually Debo
2
came
years
down.
ago.
Yeah. So, that could very well happen. We just didn't have a first-round receiver waiting in the wings. I agree with you that he's more of a Debo replacement than an Aiyuk replacement, but we have that capital. You got Jawan Jennings, who will obviously be a part of the offense, and just overall asking for, top-line money when they finally have had to pay their defense in recent years. They got away with it while their guys were on rookie deals, and now they've had to pay them. And, you got the Ufonga deal, you got Nick Bosa, you got Greenlaw, you got a lot of guys, Fred Warner, you got a lot of guys that are making top dollar on that defense. So a lot of decisions for the 49ers to make with Brandon Aiyuk. I'm going to say that you're probably right. I mean, the same answer is to say that he starts week 1 on San Fran. I know you said that draft picks aren't what 49ers are looking for, and you're absolutely right with that. But if the Patriots came calling with their first, after what we saw the Bears get from the Panthers first this year, do you think they turned that down? That's what I'm saying. I mean, we have really good recent precedent about this, and the Patriots will be bad even with Brandon Aiyuk.
No, yeah, I agree with that. I question whether the Patriots would do that, but
yeah, that is a fair question.
And then the question becomes: are the 49ers willing to just kind of say, okay, maybe this isn't going to be our year. We need to reset. We need to reset our cap because we're going to have to sign Purdy next year. I mean, that's possible. They do have a brutal schedule. We'll talk about that in a second. But I just think that's really unlikely that they're willing to kind of take a year off, basically, in what should be a kind of peak Super Bowl win. Like, they're coming off a Super Bowl. They've been to a couple in the last 4 years. So it would be really tough to say, okay, we can trade this pick for a first, and then, even if it is a high first, and say, we're going to give up one of our 10 best players. That probably one of their 5 best players, to be honest, because Brandon Aiyuk is really good. So I just think that would be a tough pill to swallow for both the organization and the fan base.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that's all fair to say. Let's jump back to the top of this team here, and that is with Brock Purdy, who you were just saying, who is going to get that payday next year, most likely. But Brock Purdy, where do you kind of rank him right now in your Dynasty look? Because he's one of those guys that remains somewhat polarizing, but he's going to get paid. He will almost certainly get paid in San Francisco, and he's going to still have Kyle Shanahan and a good offense around him.
Yeah, I think he's probably a little bit underrated. I guess I put him right around Tua, and I'm higher on Tua than the market, but I mean they're both running basically the same offense. They've both got tons of skill players around them. Neither one of them is going to be it's going to give you kind of a whole lot of fantasy points on the ground. Purdy will give you a little bit more than Tua will probably, but I think they're probably very similar players fantasy wise. So in that 12, 13, 14 range of quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. Like if he's my QB2 in a super flex, I'm more than happy.
As am I. And that's why I'm also interested in Purdy, because last year we saw, near dead last in passing attempts for the 49ers because they didn't need to. They added Christian McCaffrey. Right. They were winning games with their defense. We've talked about this summer about how we expect the 49ers that, they could take a step back on defense and how that could translate to a jump in passing volume for this offense that has not needed to pass. So how do you think that could cause Purdy to jump maybe a tier if we're asking him to actually pass more as opposed to just having efficiency with the numbers he's given?
Yeah, I think if anything, it could increase their pass volume. It could increase their pace. I mean, they're a very slow team offensively. I mean, they just don't play fast. And most of Sean McVay is kind of the outlier when it comes to Shanahan coaches and the Shanahan coaching through. They generally play fairly slow. They don't run a whole lot of snaps. So if we both kind of think their defense and we're not talking like a step back from, elite to bad. It's probably if they could just go from elite to middle of the pack, then that's, it just changes their game script so much that they have to play faster. They have to become more pass heavy. So yeah, I think he could certainly, if he hits up to, 35 touchdowns or something like that, then you got to jump him into into the Burrow, Love, CJ Stroud, those kind of guys, and just put him right there.
Yeah, and I think that's where the value lies, is with that potential to make that jump. I think Tua, not that we saw the best of him already, but last year was a career year for him. It's more than likely that he either repeats it or goes lower than it. We know what his ceiling most likely is for Tua. But if you look at Brock Purdy and you see that, the possible jump in attempts, and you're talking about, if those touchdowns rise, we could see a jump in tier. And I think that's something that he offers that Tua doesn't at that, price point that could pose, really good value when we're looking back on this a year from now. Yeah. So I think it'll be really interesting to watch Brock Purdy as well. Just in general, is a very interesting player of just this whole story that he's been able to pull off. But let's. I want to ask you this: Jared Goff or Brock Purdy?
Still Purdy.
Still Purdy. Okay, interesting. Because I think that's
it's close though. I think Goff is going to have a really good year. So,
yeah.
But I mean, dynasty wise, it's Purdy just because he's so much younger. Goff's 30, so
yeah, and Purdy will get
just because of the age.
Purdy will get a significant bump in value the minute he signs his extension as well, and that extension is coming. Let's move on to the running back room, and by that running back room, I mean Christian McCaffrey. They traded for him halfway through last year, and safe to say it worked out. Top 10 player in the top 100 right there. But regardless of that, we just know Christian McCaffrey is the best running back in football, but he's 28. Do we have any worries about Christian McCaffrey falling off at any point in the near future?
I mean, you have to a little bit just because of the workload and because he's not Derrick Henry. He's not necessarily a unicorn, but I mean, he's had huge workloads before and come back and been just fine. So other than that, no. I mean, he's still an integral part of the offense. The offense runs through him, always will, as long as he's there. So no, I'm not super worried. He's the same concerns that literally any other player has, and that's injury. Otherwise, if he plays 17 games, he's guaranteed to be a top 5 player.
Yeah. That's the gist of it. It's just the one thing to bring up with people who roster CMC, because he will be fantastic. It's the same concept as Tyreek Hill in a way of you have those guys going up in age, but if they do suffer that nagging lower injury, then we have a very new narrative that gets spun. Yep. With Tyreek Hill, it's the speedster that all of a sudden is having hammy issues or calf issues or whatever. With Christian McCaffrey, it'll be a turning 29-year-old running back coming off an injury, riddled season in a way if he got hurt, God forbid. Because everyone desperately wants Christian McCaffrey to be healthy for all time.
Dynasty-wise, you are kind of holding a time bomb there. You're holding a hand grenade because he is super valuable. He is going to have, if he plays, he's going to be an elite player. He's going to be a championship caliber player, championship caliber dynasty or fantasy player. But kind of any kind of quasi-serious injury just could tank his value at any time.
Yeah, so it's certainly something that dynasty owners should at least be mindful of and recognize the risk of. But going back to that is there any running back else in this room that do you think Elijah Mitchell's the backup? I think that's the only other thing to really touch on here.
Yes, but I don't think he's dynasty relevant.
I'll say Jordan Mason starts nagging into that role, 1A, 1B. Jordan Mason, superstar in the making. Deebo Samuel, Ricky Pearsall, we got Juwan Jennings, the rest of this receiver room. What are your thoughts on them? Deebo Samuel, obviously 28, going into this isn't his contract year, but second to last year in his contract, like you were saying before. So what are your thoughts on these guys? Because very polarizing guys in Dynasty, it feels like.
Yeah, I think with Deebo and with Kittle, they're both in kind of the same situation we talked about before, and that their only value is what they can give you production-wise. They really have no dynasty trade value. So because of their age, because of how much time they tend to both miss, they both get nicked up because they both play a very physical style of football. So
yes,
they tend to carry some nagging injuries and both kind of miss some time. So yeah, if you're rostering these guys, it's basically for the value that they can give you in any given year, and there's really no dynasty trade potential, but that's fine, right? It's kind of like Alvin Kamara, any of those guys. It's you understand that by rostering them, they have no trade value, but their value is whatever production they can give you.
Yeah, and you could always flip to a contender in week 6 or week 7 or something like that. Someone will buy in.
Yeah, maybe in the playoffs, when you
Yeah.
approach the playoffs, you may be able to flip into a contender. But right now, nobody really
Right
wants
now
to
it's
buy
not
these
good.
guys.
Yeah, Kittle. I'm hopeful that Kittle has an even better year than last year. Honestly, I think Kittle could have a bit of a resurgence this year if we see that jump in passing volume and the pace of play that could happen just by pure regression metrics. Especially on the chance that Brandon Aiyuk, isn't on the team, or if any of the receivers miss time, which has obviously happened, like you were just saying. So I still like Kittle this year. I've been actively trying to buy Kittle. I've drafted him in a few spots, um, but it's there's certainly the risk. I hate going for tight ends that I feel confident will miss time. It's or play injured, and I have to ask that question. So it's certainly it's difficult. But Christian Moreno here says he's got Brandon Aiyuk in a keeper league. He's hoping the contract situation fires him up. I think that's safe to say for now. But once he inks that contract, he throws it in Kenny Galladay style. No, God forbid. No.
My only concern at this point is we've seen with these hold in hold out types that they can be more susceptible to injury once they get back on the field. So that's my only real concern. Like I said, I really like the Niners offense this year because, like we mentioned earlier, I think they are going to have to play at a different pace and a different volume that they're used to. So I think, especially in the passing game, I think there's more opportunities for these guys.
So let's jump over to that win-loss total, the 11.5. Joel is what the book has. So 11.5, taking the over, you taking the under on this back-to-back Super Bowl run?
I'm slamming the under. This team is this is your prototype Super Bowl loser hangover season. Like they played 20 games last year. They played 19 games the year before that. They played a lot of games in the last couple of years. This is without a lot of turnover. So they've got a brutal schedule, which we hit earlier. I think if you look at Warren Sharp and the job he does, they do a really good job. Him and Richard Rebar over there, kind of documenting the rest differential. They've got like a historic rest differential, negative rest differential this year. So their opponents have massive rest advantages in 11 games or something like that. So that's huge. It's almost like one of the worst ever. So, I just think that, we talked about the possibility of regression with their defense, losing Dre Greenlaw, Hufanga coming back from the ACL. They lost a couple. They lost Chase Young. They lost Kinlaw. So there's a lot that they've got to. Not those guys are world beaters, but they're starters that you've got to replace. So I think there's a potential for that defense to really come down and force the offense to play differently than they're used to. So I'm slamming that under 11.5. I would ladder bet that down to 9.5 because I think you could see a significant regret. That's a really good division too. Arizona's going to come. The Rams got some offensive line issues with injuries right now, but if they get healthy, I think that's a really good team. We'll see what Seattle does with the new.
I think Seattle's going to
coach, new offense. Yeah, so that's a really tough division. That there's no gimmies in that division at all. So I way under 11.5.
Yeah, I'll take the under as well. I'm not going to say way under, but I think it's a 10-11 win team. Certainly not a 13 win team or a 12 win team, in my opinion. But we'll see, because like you said, I am very curious to see how the division shakes out. I think it'll be one of the interesting ones. Biggest sells, sneaky buys. What do you got for me? Anything else?
I'm selling Pearsall. We've talked about him before. I think he's a better real life player than he's fantasy player. I just don't see where his touches come from in this offense, assuming that Aiyuk is back and they don't sell Debo this year. I'm buying Aiyuk. It's just the question is how low can I get him? And I'm also buying Purdy if people don't want to value him as a starting quarter or a high end starting quarterback, especially second quarterback. Then I'm willing to buy him as well.
I agree with the buys. I'm still holding on Pearsall just because I think
that's fair.
I
mean,
think
you're not getting that much for him, so
that's really why. I don't think you're getting more for him than what you drafted 3 months ago. In fact, you might be getting less because now we're all getting a little bit more redraft minded because we're focusing on this year finally, as opposed to in May where we're like, okay, we're good to wait at least 2 years for Ricky Pearsall to work out, and then 3 months later we're like, yeah, we're gonna sell him. So I'm willing to hold just because I liked him as a prospect. I was a little bit more in on him than the average person. And I love this landing spot. I agree that I need Deebo Samuel to get out of town before Ricky Pearsall can do anything like that.
Yep.
But let's move on to the team that beat them and the team that beats everybody, with the fourth best player in the NFL taking the reins and the second best quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs. It's so funny putting Lamar ahead of him.
I mean, just that's insane. You should
so,
just throw that player voting top 100 just out the window. If Patrick Mahomes is not the best player in the league, then it's stupid. Just throw it out. It's nonsense.
It's fantastic. Anyway, Brett Veach, the GM, back again. Andy Reid calling, head coach, offensive coordinator. We know Andy Reid, Matt Nagy calling the plays yet again. Returning to try to make us forget about his Bears tenure and just live off of Andy Reid's riches for the rest of his career. And I don't blame him one bit. But let's start with that. Yeah, let's start with this team. We got Patty Mahomes. Is he your QB1 for Dynasty, or is it Josh Allen?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you want. Like, I would expect Allen Hurts to be the highest scoring players in any given year. I mean, the value of Mahomes is that he's insanely consistent at an extremely high level. So he's not going to give you the production that, especially the rushing production that the Allen Hurts, Lamar types will give you. But you can just expect him to just put up, 35, 40 touchdowns in any given year. And that's exceptionally valuable.
Yeah, it's Aaron Rodgers. It's younger Aaron Rodgers in terms of production.
Yep.
Yeah, so can't complain with that. With Patrick Mahomes and so forth. Now, the question I want to ask you, as someone who has Patrick Mahomes, I did an 18-team startup not too long ago, and I had the 101. And I took Patrick Mahomes, Superflex, and it was a long wait, Joel. It was a really long
18 team.
Yeah. It was a long wait, and then there was a third round reversal. And long story short,
that's brutal.
Bo Nix and Michael Penix are my QB2 and 3. Yeah. So my question is, for the dynasty owners in situations like that or other situations, is there any thought about selling Mahomes for a world's profit, or is he one of those guys that you think you want to hold on to for all time?
I've got him as a buy this year, just because remember 2 years ago, like when he had that MVP season, people were down on him. He's kind of in the exact same position he is now. It's like, well, I'd rather have this guy, and then he went out and had an MVP season. So, I still think he's a buy, but yeah, I mean, if you can get like 4 firsts still, then I'm probably okay doing it, but I'm not moving him for anything less than a king's ransom.
Yep, and that's fair enough. Now, Isiah Pacheco, the second name here on this Chiefs team to talk about. I think no player on the Chiefs have gotten as much hype as Isiah Pacheco has over the last month in the fantasy community. His AAP has soared. It's moving closer and closer into that top 10 from what I saw. In Dynasty, it's probably still around that RB14 range if I had to guess right now. But Isiah Pacheco, what are your thoughts on this running back room? Because right now, Andy Reid came out and said he can pass block, he can work third downs. We could work CH in there. Didn't even mention Deneric Prince or any of those other auxiliary guys to take over the Jerick McKinnon role. It seems very much like Isiah Pacheco is going to have his run of the backfield once again. So Isiah Pacheco, all of a sudden, not the flash in the pan, let's see what he can do guy. He's the entrenched starter. So how do you approach that in Dynasty right now?
I think I have to take the L on Isiah Pacheco.
As to
I wasn't interested in him. I didn't believe in him, but he just keeps producing. So yeah, I mean, he probably is worth that late first, the contenders level first. I've been hesitant to be willing to give up a first for him, but he's probably worth it. I mean, he just keeps. There's nothing else. Like he is the bell cow there. I mean, you can kind of quibble about his touchdown upside just because of the way their offense runs and how much they throw in the red zone and in the gold zone and how much shovel passes and all that kind of stuff that they run, close to the goal line. But yeah, I mean, he's the bell cow in an elite offense. So yeah, he's again, got to take the L on that one. I was wrong.
As was I. I mean, I'm not going to let you take it all yourself there because I 100% thought he was just a straight line runner with straight line speed without much third down upside, and he's preparing to prove me wrong once again in a different regard. And, I mean, the thing that makes him really attractive for Dynasty is that he's not, he's under contract still for another year after this. So I think maybe 2. I think he might be a free agent in 2026 somehow. But, 4 years for 2022. Yeah, he'll be free agent.
He's got 2 more years. Yeah, I think that's right.
So stuff like that. I mean, that is Dynasty gold when you can say that he's going to be on the Chiefs for the next 2 years at a minimum. And given his effectiveness and given his price point, I don't think the Chiefs have any plans to replace him anytime soon because they've had plenty of opportunity to do so and they've passed every single time. So,
and they've also gotten burned by drafting a bad running back in the first round. So I don't think that's something they're going to spend high draft capital on.
He might take over the Jerick McKinnon role. He was CH. It's the post type breakout for Clyde Edwards-Helaire. It's coming. Good God, what a player. But Isiah Pacheco, I want to throw out 1 or 2 other names for you to compare with. Would you rather have, as I rack my brain, Rachaad White and a second or Pacheco?
Whew, that's tough. Probably I'll take the side that has the second on it because I think they're going to be fairly close production wise. And oh man, that's tough.
That's what I'm here for.
I think process wise, you probably have to take White and the second, but I wouldn't feel good about it.
I think I take Pacheco. Maybe I'm just scarred from recent drafts or anything like that, but I've become more willing to move on from seconds by the day because I feel very confident in my ability to get more if I needed to. Seconds seem quite easy to buy nowadays. I don't know why. I don't know if that's just me or the leagues I'm in, but I can always seem to get a second back if I needed to. And I want the best player in the deal in that situation. I have my own worries about Rachaad White, to be honest, but he feels like one of those guys that's just a tier below or so. Would you trade Jonathan Brooks straight up for Isiah Pacheco?
No.
I'm testing you right now. This one.
That's a good one because I mean, what was Brooks like? The 109, 110 in this year's class,
or even
something like that. So if we're saying that Isiah Pacheco is worth a contender's first, then that's probably his value. I would hold Brooks because I like Brooks a lot, and I think he's kind of an elite player. But I think that's probably value wise. That's probably pretty close.
Yeah. All right. Well, there's some comparisons for all you guys out there. Now we get to the tricky part. This receiving room. Now we know Travis Kelce is Travis Kelce, and Travis Kelce will continue to be Travis Kelce, although he didn't have 1,000 yards last year, so certifiable bust. But aside from that, we have a very interesting wide receiver room of Hollywood Brown, a talented but often injured type of guy. Rashee Rice, awaiting suspension but could avoid suspension. But either way, he's talented. And obviously, you got first-round draft pick Xavier Wirth. I had some double take there of whether Xavier Wirth was actually a first-round pick or not. But Xavier Wirth is a Kansas City Chief as well. So that's going to be something to factor in of which one of these 3 are you trying to get at cost right
now? At cost, it's Hollywood because I don't think he's very highly valued. And I think he's got, he's the one guy who could really kind of explode. I mean, Worthy could. Rice is obviously going to be very good. I don't think Rice has the ceiling that Hollywood does. I'm not worried about the suspension at all. Let's just get into that real quick. Shout out to Drew Davenport, who you should follow on Twitter for legal advice. He's basically saying there is no trial date for Rashee Rice criminal trial. There is a civil trial, but that's just going to get pushed out and pushed out and pushed out. So this is basically turning into the Kamara situation from a couple of years ago, where the trial is probably going to get pushed back so far that there probably isn't going to be a suspension this year. And this is a situation where the league is almost certainly going to want the legal process to finish up first. like compared to the Jordan Addison situation where they could just say, okay, it's a DUI. We know exactly what happened. So we could just throw on, the suspension at any time. But this is a situation where I think the league is very much going to want the legal process to play out. So I think there's a good chance that he just doesn't even get suspended this year at all. I
think that's what's going to happen. And that's based, again, off what Drew tweeted as well, because, again, great follow on Twitter, Drew Davenport. But that's the way the NFL tends to act. They try to let the criminal proceedings go through, and then they make their suspension afterwards once that's settled. It doesn't happen. That's more often the default as opposed to them jumping early on suspension, especially when you had kind of murky situations around Rashee Rice over the entire spring. Yeah. I'm with you on that. And Rashee Rice is another one of those players that I'm too scared to draft usually, so I drafted him on that Warrior Bowl team. So we'll see about that and how that works.
I think that one's going to work out for you.
Yeah, I mean it's that true thing of he's been falling in drafts so far, and at some point you kind of need to take a chance on the talent and what we saw last year. I don't know about you, and we can talk about it right now, but I'm not remotely interested in Xavier Worthy on 2024 purposes. I have some intrigue long term, but I think it's going to take time. I think I'm not being swayed by him getting hip checked into oblivion on press coverage, because that was a concern of mine. And when you see a concern of mine and then a clip confirming it, it makes you question it. I don't care about that. I want to clarify, but it is something that I think it'll just take time. I think Hollywood's a very good receiver. I agree with everything you said about him. And Rashee Rice is a good receiver. So if those two are healthy and Travis Kelce is healthy and Isiah Pacheco is going to become just as big a part of the offense as he usually is, I don't think there's enough room for Xavier Worthy.
I think Worthy is going to be a gadget player in his first year.
Yeah.
Just because, like you said, I think there's just better options in the offense. So will he have some weeks where he's very, where he just kind of pops off? Probably. But I think the touch volume is going to be very inconsistent. He's going to be a very tough guy to start on a weekly basis.
Yeah. He's going to go 3 for 70 in week 1. And with a touchdown, obviously, where it was a highlight play of the week. And then he's going to go the next 3 weeks being a gadget player. And then we'll drop him. And then we'll pick him up again when he goes off for 2 for 141 and 2. So it'll be fantastic to ride this Xavier Worthy train, because we know he's going to be fun in this offense. I just don't think he's going to have the volume to sustain it for fantasy on any consistent basis quite yet. So
if you compare him to Hollywood Brown, who is his teammate, and Hollywood did exactly what you said, right? Remember his first game when he went 3 catches for 140 yards and 2 touchdowns or something like that against Miami that first game, and then kind of tailed off a little bit after that, after the initial buzz. So yeah, I think they're very similar players, and I think they'll probably have very similar careers. So it's not someone I want to invest in too heavily, just because, again, like we said, I just don't know. I don't think he's a guy who's going to get consistent touches.
Yeah. And I think that, with that in mind, I think it really does shape Hollywood up as a tremendous value in drafts right now, which is what you started off by saying, at cost, you want to buy Hollywood Brown. Because, this is someone that I can't forget, though, what was it, week 1 to 6 or week 1 to 8 with the Cardinals when Hollywood was
when Diop was suspended.
Unbelievable. Yeah, when Diop was suspended, you had top 5 performances. I think he was the wide receiver 4 in that stretch. That's off the top of my head. Don't quote me on that, but he was certainly a wide receiver 1 in that stretch, and he can do it. We've seen that potential, and now you add Patrick Mahomes, you add Andy Reid, and you add Matt Nagy within Andy Reid's system, and it just, I feel like we are not nearly talking about Hollywood ceiling enough. I know Travis Kelce is going to be Travis Kelce, and he is going to get his, but Hollywood is by far the best receiver they've had since Tyreek walked, and by far the best receiver the Chiefs have had outside of Tyreek since who? Help me out, in my opinion. Who am I forgetting right now? Of who was the last good Chiefs receiver other than Tyreek Hill?
Who's the guy who came over from the Eagles?
Jeremy Maclin. Yes, Jeremy Maclin was the last. That's how long ago it was since we had another receiver not named Tyreek Hill work out here. So I think I think Hollywood is going to reset a lot of narratives this year. And, I keep drafting him. I'm really tempted to use him as a keeper over someone else. Let me throw this out to you. 17th round, JSN. 12th round, Hollywood. Redraft.
Hollywood. I'd rather Hollywood. I think he's safer. Does JSN have higher upside? Sure, but I think the likelihood of Hollywood being a really good player is higher than JSN being an elite player.
I think Hollywood has just as high a ceiling as JSN right now.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm all in on Hollywood this year. I am prepared to get just so hurt, and hopefully more hurt than he ever gets hurt. Because if it doesn't work, I want it to be on talent and not because of injury, because he is just pushed so hard on there. Let's go over to that win total. I am very interested that this is the same win total as the 49ers. I find that fascinating, of 11.5 here. What are your thoughts on that? Because I feel very strongly about this.
Do you? I don't want to bet this. Because I think 11-12 is the number, and I think I don't see a real case to go really high over under either one of those like I do with the 49ers. So I would just kind of leave this one alone. If I had to, I would say under, just because it's really hard to win 12 games, but especially against a first place schedule that they're going to have to play. So I would have to lean under, but this is not a bet I would make. I'm
taking over. Not with a ton of confidence, but this is a bet I might actually place, because I am not as high on this division as you are in terms of the Raiders, at least. I mean, we both acknowledge that it's a weak division. Yeah. But the Broncos are going to be bad. Broncos are going to be a bad team. The Raiders, I think, are going to struggle tremendously. I don't think they have this quarterback room figured out. I don't think Devontae Adams is going to be happy halfway through this year. And this running back room just lost Josh Jacobs and is replacing it with the Instagram model version of of flex those quads. But yeah, and then you obviously factor in the Chargers, who are already off to a rocky start here in August. So I'll take the over. I think they're a 12-13 win team. I think this is the best core of weapons that Mahomes has had since Tyreek left. So this is going to be a fun year for the Chiefs. Once again, walk all over the AFC. Won't even matter. Just skip to January. Okay. But regardless of that, to get back on track here, biggest sell, we kind of touched on it, of Xavier Worthy. I think you were mentioning it before.
Yeah. Again, I just think for year one, he's a gadget player, and then we'll see where he goes from there. Hollywood's only signed to a 1-year deal, so it's very possible that Worthy could just kind of ascend into that role, but I'm not super confident of that. So he's the guy that he was going for. Like, man, when drafts were happening, like right after the draft, he was going like 106, 107. I always thought that was crazy. So his value is really ducked down from there. It's like if he drafts that are happening now, he doesn't go anywhere close to that high. But if you can get like that kind of price, then he's a guy I would actively kind of look to sell.
Yep, I agree with all of that. Now, let's jump into a little bit of a different topic off of the Look Inside series that we've been doing. That kind of wraps it up here, which is so fun to see. But Dynasty risers and fallers, because a lot's happened since we started this. Obviously we didn't start it, but we started doing Look Inside shows on this pod, because now we get to look and talk about the risers and fallers of this group. So, QB riser for you, who is it for you?
I'm gonna say Trevor Lawrence. I think his value has dipped down far enough to where he kind of qualifies as a riser. If you look last year, he was going like QB 8, something like that. Now he's around QB 14. I think I was just pulling up the Dynasty Nerds rankings. He is quarterback 14. So I think just the way this offense is going to run, I think he's got a chance to we'll talk about this in my RB faller. I think he's got a chance to kind of hit that 30 touchdown threshold and just kind of cement himself back into that QB2, that second tier of quarterbacks.
Yep, that's more than fair. I'm gonna go with an interesting name because I just chose one right now and then I decided to pivot off of it. I'm gonna go with Baker Mayfield. Okay, Baker Mayfield.
Nice.
Why does no one care about Baker Mayfield? That's what I'm wondering. We got a guy that is not overly old, who got paid a good contract, and he's going on Fantasy Pros at least, if you buy their consensus. He's the QB 27 right now. He's going right in between the Matt Staffords, Michael Penix, Aaron Rodgers, Geno Smith, that group. And Baker Mayfield has Mike Evans. He's got Chris Godwin. We had Jalen McMillan. You still have Trey Palmer. Kate Auden is a NFL tight end. And yes, you lost Dave Canales as the coordinator. Yes, we don't know what that will look like with Baker. And yes, we haven't really had back-to-back good seasons with Baker. But I loved what I saw last year. This team won a playoff game. It's a team that almost won two. I believe in Baker Mayfield. I always have. I always thought the Browns were terrible with him, and the Panthers aren't much better. But I believe in Baker Mayfield. I believe in the weapons he has around him to make it worthwhile. The offensive line should be better as well because the offensive line was not that good last year due to injury and due to whatever. But I think Baker Mayfield is someone that should be higher on ADP right now.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. I mean, if you think about it, he came out in the same class as Josh Allen, same class as Lamar Jackson.
Exactly.
I mean, we don't think about those guys as old in any way whatsoever. So,
Not at all.
But I think there is a perception, like you say, that he's within the community that he's old, and he's not. So he's just been disappointing, and he's only been disappointing relative to his draft position, right? Otherwise, he's been kind of okay. So, and you put him in an offense. Like I like Jalen McMillan quite a bit, and the camp buzz on him is huge. So this could be a really interesting offense. They're bad at running the ball, and that's why we talked about Rachaad White a little earlier. That's why he's just going to get a ton of dump offs. So yeah, I think there's potential for this to be a really the defenses in the NFC South are terrible. Like they're all bad.
That was what I was going to mention as well.
The Saints is the only one that's any good, but they're really old. So yeah, I think there's 6 games where they're going to have chances to put up points. So yeah, I like that call a lot.
Yeah. Let's move on to the running backs now. Now, what is your running back or sorry, QBs, fallers? I almost skipped. I want to stick with the hot stuff. Let's go over to faller right now. Who's your QB faller?
I would take the low-hanging fruit and say CJ Stroud. It's not we've talked about it a ton. I don't dislike CJ Stroud. I just don't think he belongs in that top tier with Allen, Hurts, Mahomes. So when he goes out and throws for 30 touchdowns and doesn't run for any and doesn't have any kind of rushing upside, I think people will see that he shouldn't be valued any higher than Burrow, Love, those guys. And like if you think about this team is going to want to run the ball. They did last year with Devin Singletary. Now they got Mixon dinged up a little bit, but they also play at a very slow pace, just like the 40, or kind of below average pace, just like the 49ers do. So yeah, I just don't think there's that. I don't see an explosive season from CJ Stroud where he hits like 40 touchdown passes or something like that. So yeah, I think he's just going to drop. If he is still valued in that top tier, I think he's going to drop down a tier.
Yeah. That's fair enough. I'm going to throw out Anthony Richardson. I know that's a little bit bold, a little bit feisty, but and he has been dropping a little bit right now, but Anthony Richardson is somebody that has been hyped up for so long. And I feel like the hype is a little bit overdone right now. If we're talking about him repeatedly going the top 5, top 6, top 7, number QB7 right now on Fantasy Pros ADP of the collective sources. So when I think about that, when I think about how much we still have unknown with Anthony Richardson, the injury possibilities that could arise from him, I don't want to spend my draft capital on someone with that much risk in my eyes still. Because this was somebody this wasn't a bona fide 101 prospect. This was someone that was a freak athlete, and we're hoping everything else kind of comes with it. And he looks good through the first couple weeks, but we have to see. And right now, the price is just a little bit too high for me to like it like that. We do have a question in the chat, and I'm always happy to help those with Canelo here. Maybe he's the boxer. But on the 14-man keeper league, any tips you can give for a 14-man keeper league?
I think again, depends on do you have keepers at a certain price? Do you have keepers at a certain draft position or something like that? That all kind of plays in. The one kind of tip I'll give is if it's not just you're keeping your best players or whatever, if there is a price, an auction price or a round price that you have to that comes with the player. Don't forget, the value isn't everything. You still need elite players, especially in a 14-man team. So even if you've got, say, a Justin Jefferson at a fair price, at a first-round value, but you've got a lesser player at an insane value, like in the 15th round or something like that, you still need that Justin Jefferson type to win a league like that. So don't just kind of fall for the value. Remember that you need elite players as well. So, I mean, you don't want to keep him if he's overpriced, if some kind of auction price that's way too high or something like that. But if it's just, I don't want to give up Justin Jefferson because I have to give up my first round pick. Well, Justin Jefferson is worth your first round pick. It's the kind of player you want with your first round pick. So don't fall in love with value at the expense of keeping elite players.
Yeah, and to go off of that as well, it's the thing with keeper leagues that you don't really realize until you get into it is that everyone else in your league is also keeping players. They're keeping them too. So when the top players keep on getting captain, then all of a sudden, maybe the first player off the board is, it's throw a name at me. It's Cooper Kupp.
Kyrie Williams.
Yeah, exactly. And especially in a 14 team, we're going to have a lot of the top tier talent kept most likely. So, when you factor that in, your draft picks become a little bit less value. So that's why it's folks like that. They're keeping 8. Oh my goodness. Nice.
Okay.
Keeping 8 and doing Moxie, seeing QBs going the second round. I mean, if he's keeping 8, then
yeah. Again, if you're keeping 8, then basically your first round is like the 9th round, essentially.
Yeah,
so, I could very much see that. And like you said, that's the thing you've got to factor in is however many rounds you're keeping. That's where you've got to kind of discount the players that are going to be available to you in the first, second round of the draft because. You've got basically 8 rounds of players who are being kept ahead of the draft. So,
yeah, it'll be really interesting. Keep on asking us if you have any more specific questions. Happy to help always. But let's go dynasty risers and fallers with running backs. Here, who's your riser? And I think you mentioned him before.
Mentioned it earlier. It's Chase Brown. Mostly because I don't think Zach Moss is any good. So I think he's going to be the starting running back and a very good offense. And I think he's a good player, and I think he's going to maintain that role. And that's a team that does not want to have to pay they're cheap, so they're not going to want to have to pay for a running back. So you have zero chance that they're going to pay for one coming in free agency. So I think worst case scenario is kind of mid-round rookie to combat with next year. So I think it's a spot where he could keep that job for a couple of years.
Yep, and I'm going to go on to Javonte Williams. I will say it. This is my flag plant. I'm doing it here.
Nice.
I have been in on Javonte Williams since he was a prospect. He was unbelievable at UNC. He was good as rookie. He was very good as rookie year. And then Sean Payton coming. Do you see his quote last week? I lost it when he said, "Oh, he looks like a totally different player than this time last year." Really?
He should.
When he was like 8 months removed from an ACL, LCL, PCL tear in his knee, yeah, he looks different. Believe it or not, Sean. God,
Funny.
But I can't stand him. But either way, Javonte Williams is a supremely talented player, and if he can get back to his pre-injury form, he is going to smash his ADP. So I'm happy to call him a riser in my book. What about your faller?
Agreed. I mentioned this earlier. I'm going to stay with Travis Etienne. I just don't think he's a special player. I think a lot of his value last year was on touchdowns. I think he was under 4 yards, right around 4 yards a carry. He just wasn't super efficient. So I think a lot of those touchdowns turned back to passing touchdowns for Trevor Lawrence. That could really ding Etienne's value. So he's by next year, he's going to be what, 4th, 5th year? Because remember, he missed that first year. So he's going to start aging pretty soon. So I think the value is going to start declining. So I'm out on Travis Etienne.
Interestingly, and I did have a trade that I did that was very spur of the moment, and I got mixed reactions from my friends about it. It involves Mr. Travis Etienne. I moved Etienne and it one was called non-tight end premium 1 QB. Etienne and Goddard for Olave and Joku.
Oh, that's a smash, dude. That's insane.
Okay, see, there we go. See, I had a friend who because I
push back because you robbed the other manager.
No, because I do shows like this and I make fancy football content. Sometimes I get texts that are like they're gentle. Like, I think you lost that one, man. It's like, I feel very good. I feel very good about moving someone who I have a lot of questions about on the offense.
In a non-tight end premium, I would give up Goddard and ETN for Olave alone.
Yeah,
easily.
Yeah, so I'm getting a Joku as well, which is a nice little pairing.
Yeah,
that I can work out there. But regardless, okay. So now I got that. I can bring that up. I'm gonna go with Trey Benson. And it's not that I dislike Trey Benson. I was okay with him as a prospect. I had some questions. Honestly, running style very similar to Isiah Pacheco, aside from the way he physically runs, which is more normal. But with Trey Benson, he's just going so high in drafts right now. And listen, I love you, Jagger, if you're watching. I love you so much, man, Jagger May. But you had him in like your top 5 dynasty running backs right now, or top 10 or something like that in your recent post. And I think the dynasty market is getting a little bit ahead of itself on Trey Benson. I think we have questions about what this offense will be able to support. James Conner is still going to be the guy. Sure, James Conner could miss time, but I am not pulling. I don't think Trey Benson is worth what he's going for right now.
I can't argue. I agree with you 100%. I was really ambivalent on him as a prospect. I like some things, didn't like some things, and now you're hearing like Jonathan Gannon's being pretty blunt and saying he's not even the number 2 right now. Let alone competing with Connor for the number 1. He's behind Amari DeMercado for the number 2 job. So DeMercado was serviceable last year when Connor was hurt. So yeah, I don't know how much you're going to get from Benson this year. And if he doesn't do anything, then like his dynasty value just tanks. He has no value. You're basically looking at year 2 Zamir White, who had no value and people were cutting because he didn't see the field year 1. So I think there's definitely that risk with Benson.
Yeah, it's something that I think we need to factor in a little bit more of now. Let's move on to wide receivers. Excuse me. What's your wide receiver riser?
I'm going back to the well. I think Christian Watson's going to stay healthy this year. I think he's going to be the guy that the offense revolves around. And we've seen elite production from him when he's been healthy. I think this is the year he stays healthy. And I think he, like right now on Dynasty Nerds, he's wide receiver 47. Like he should be easily, if he stays healthy, he's kind of easily a top 25 wide receiver. So as a riser, I think that's the guy who can just kind of make that the biggest kind of impact with just a healthy season. That's all he really needs.
Yeah, I agree completely. I was not big on Christian Watson as a prospect. I am warming up to him by the day, and I don't want the hamstring news to, he fixed the other hamstring to even it out. Maybe that is going to be the difference, because the ceiling is so tantalizing for Christian Watson. It's not a cop out, but I would just pick the names that we talked about today of Calvin Ridley. I think is ridiculously undervalued in Dynasty, and I've been drafting him everywhere, but now that's going to change and flip the other way with the Hopkins injury. These people will overreact. But I'll go with Chris Godwin. Building off of my Baker Mayfield love, I think Chris Godwin is completely forgotten about as a potentially elite wide receiver. They're moving him back to the slot. I'm very high on him this year, and he's going to have a very good season back in the slot this year. So very high on Chris Godwin. What about you for fallers?
I'm going to say Ladd McConkey. And as much as we may like him as a player, remember in college, he was an undersized receiver who couldn't stay healthy. We've already heard word that he's getting nicked up in camp.
Yeah.
I just don't think he has elite upside, right? I think it's going to be a bad offense. Justin Herbert's already dinged up. He may get a ton of catches, but I just don't think it's going to lead to a lot of touchdowns. So yeah, I don't see an elite season that I think people are valuing the expectation with him as.
Yep, that's more than fair. I think that's something that people really need to focus on with a lot of these rookie guys. So I'm going to take it a step further and choose another rookie, and that's Keon Coleman, another guy that I didn't have strong feelings about, but because he has made so many fantastic media clips and has made so many people smile, his ADP is rising by the day. And I'm not sure if he's a starter in this offense. He should be, but I don't know where this pecking order is going to be. I feel very confident based on everything I've read that Khalil Shakir will be a big part of this offense, that Curtis Samuel will be a big part of this offense. I don't know if Keon Coleman is going to be ahead of those guys on the pecking order. And then you mentioned, Dalton Kincaid. So there's a lot of guys here to feed. And I have a lot of question marks about whether Keon Coleman could be what we need him to be for fantasy to justify his price. Right now he's going in that wide receiver 3 range. I think that's way too high for what I'm expecting for year one. Let's go on to tight end here. What's your riser faller? Start with the riser here on tight end.
I'm glad you're here for this one because it's Isaiah Likely. And
every single year, man. It's every single year. I like him, but it's every single year.
1 year ago, you and I both agreed that this was going to be the next Gronk, Aaron Hernandez kind of double elite tight end room. Didn't turn out that way. I think we were just a year early. It's year 3. Tight ends take longer to develop. We've heard whispers from camp that they want to use him as the offensive weapon. They didn't do anything to upgrade that receiver room, right? It's still Rashad Bateman, like Zay Flowers, but it's still Rashad Bateman. It's still, they drafted Devontae Walker, but I don't think he's ready. I think that's a guy who needs some maturing before he can kind of take advantage of his talents. So, yeah, I think there's opportunity for him. I just can't quit Isaiah Likely. If we come back here a year from now and he's the same year last year, then I'll choose somebody else. But right now, I still can't quit the guy.
I am so happy to buy Isaiah Likely always. I'll believe it when I see it. I'm sorry. I'm losing the faith a little bit, not in Isaiah Likely, but in their ability to get 2 tight ends into an offense and make it actually work, because it's been so long since we've seen really any team in the NFL be able to do that. And I mean, listen, I watched the Aaron Hernandez documentary last week, and it was a long time ago. So,
you're right.
So I'm hopeful, because they're saying all the right things out of camp, and it makes 1,000% sense that Isaiah Likely should be running routes at a much higher clip than what he does when Mark Andrews is healthy. But I remain a little bit questionable, but I'm hoping that I hope you're right. I really, really do. I'll throw out another name here. At tight end, there's such an ugly room, but I'm gonna go with I don't. If it's hard for tight ends, man. Risers, I'm going Pat Freiermuth. I'm sorry, I'm saying it. I have thought about it every day since the whatever show we did. I assume it was the Steelers Look Inside series where we were like, or we did Tears. We did Tears, I remember.
Yeah.
And you shellacked him. And I've been thinking about it every day since. And I didn't do enough to stand up for Pat Freiermuth. I didn't do enough. This is someone who's also going into year 3, who is a very talented tight end. I believe that this offense that is so heavily utilizing in tight ends, and it's so built around the tight end position, and they really do not have a wide receiver 2 to speak of. They got Van Jefferson, who's going to probably play there. Got Calvin Austin. Roman Wilson got hurt the other day. It's George Pickens, and it's really Muth, who's going to be a big part of this offense. So I'm buying in on Freiermuth. I think he's undervalued in Dynasty right now, and his value next year is going to be higher than what it is right now. Fight me. Here's
where I could be wrong on Freiermuth.
Yeah, let's hear.
like you said, they do not have a wide receiver 2. They don't have anything that resembles a wide receiver 2. Like George Pickens probably should be a wide receiver 2, but he's their default wide receiver 1. And I don't like the way he used Kyle Pitts last year, but I don't think Freiermuth is a guy that you can use like they used Pitts last year. You can't use him as like a wide receiver. You have to use him as like a traditional tight end. So I may be letting how Arthur Smith kind of abused Kyle Pitts last year kind of color how he's going to use Freiermuth. So I'll take a potential possible L on that one. I could see myself being wrong on.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. We'll come back to it. We'll come back to it. What about a faller for you on tight end?
It's just Dallas Goedert. I'm done. I'm done. Well. I can't do it anymore.
It's been such a long road.
Yeah, I mean, he's never been that good, right? He's
a better real life tight end than a fantasy tight end.
Yeah, he can't stay on the field. He's so far behind A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith in the pecking order. Even though it's a really skinny target tree, he's just a really, really low branch and a really skinny branch on that tree. I can't do it anymore. I'm done. This is probably the year that he blows up. But yeah,
it won't happen unless one of them get hurt. I mean, realistically, exactly. I think at this point we know that it's not going to happen.
And if that's the only way that you have to kind of high end production, then it's probably time to be off that train.
Yeah. Then you're probably cutting him by week 3 anyway, and at that point he's not worth the draft investment.
There's just with the development of the rookie tight ends last year with Kincaid and Laporta and Trey McBride, there's just so many better options that I cannot see going into the year with Dallas Goedert as my starting tight end. I'm just never going to be happy with that.
Yeah, last year was so neat for the tight end position. By the way, did you see Johnny Wilson's running as the wide receiver 3 right now? Eagles camp?
I did not. Yeah, ahead of Ainias Smith. Ainias Smith is not going to be a thing.
I mean, maybe he might have missed like a day or two, and that's why he was running with the ones. I didn't look too closely.
Just like Paris Campbell wasn't a thing.
Okay, we can't go Goddard to Paris Campbell because that's just going to break my heart. But Canelo also coming back here with a few other things. He's been doing mocks, wide receiver round 1, running back round 2, building his team like that. Usually getting Lamar, Caleb, Anthony Richardson in the 3rd, 4th rounds. I mean, the thing is, if you're taking a lot of your position players, I like the idea of taking a swing on the elite QB, sure. Especially if Lamar is there. But I mean, I think there's a tier.
Yeah, assuming this has got to be one quarterback because Lamar goes the first 3 or 4 picks of a super flex. So, I mean, it's always good to have an elite quarterback in single QB. It's a significant advantage over basically half the league. So, yeah, if you can get Lamar in a 3rd, 4th round of a keeper draft, I'm all for it.
Yeah, not too bad at all. My faller, I'm taking. Listen, you took a stab at my. My Pat Freiermuth, you took a stab at my Dallas Goedert, and even though I agree with you on the latter, I'm taking a stab at Luke Musgrave here. I'm not saying he's a bad player, but I don't think that this offense is going to utilize him that much, and I think that's going to be I think Tucker Kraft is going to have a bigger role than you're expecting. I think they're both going to work in, and with how they utilize the receivers, I think there's just too many mouths to feed in Green Bay. That will all be fantastic for Jordan Love, but I don't think it's going to be enough for fantasy to be trustworthy beyond touchdown or bust in a good offense, which will still have a role, but I think that's what he is. I think that's what he's going to be.
Yeah, I think where that's fair is just that, and I've talked about it before, there are so many mouths to feed in this offense that any one of them can get lost in any given week. So, yeah, they're all going to have spikes at some point, but especially in a managed league, it's going to be so hard to trust those guys.
Yeah, it's going to be so hard to pick. Anyway, well, that wraps up the rises and fallers here, Joel. We touched on a lot here this hour 20 long episode.
Yeah, for sure. We'll have to revisit these at the end of the year.
Oh yeah, no, we'll have to because this is where we call each other out. Where Pat Freiermuth opts up for a tight end 1 overall season, and it'll be fantastic. But either way, I want to quickly remind everybody to definitely check out that Women Fantasy Football raffle, the WAF raffle. To be sure to check out for a chance to win that signed Garrett Wilson jersey, that signed Jalen Waddle jersey, and supporting a really good cause for women in sports and that scholarship that they're making for that. just $5 for raffle tickets. The link is in the description below. And as well, if you're interested in Dynasty Nerds, be sure to use code CLUBFANTASY to get 15% off any subscription to Dynasty Nerds. Join the nerd herd with all their amazing tools, Dynasty Trade Calculator, all that good stuff. You can join using code CLUBFANTASY, get 15% off. So, Joel, any final words for our amazing listeners out there?
No, that's it. Expo week, so that's always exciting. Looking forward to that. So if you're going to be in town, come up and say hi. Looking forward to meeting everyone in Canton this week.
Yeah, Expo is a fantastic thing. I wish I could be there this year. I was there a couple of years ago. It's a great group of people, great time to meet everybody, put a face to the Twitter profile picture that we all have.
Exactly.
But yeah, all right. So for myself and for Joel here, thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to follow Club Fantasy FFL on Twitter, Instagram, all the good stuff right there. Be sure to check it out so you're staying in tune with all of the good content that comes out here at Club Fantasy FFL. So we'll see you guys next week. Remember, Dynasty's like a disco ball, keeps on spinning year round. So join the club every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern right here with Club Fantasy. Stay healthy, stay safe, have a good week. Enjoy week 1 of the preseason.